The Chiefs draft board is getting to the point where it's in shape. Who could the Chiefs be looking at taking? We're going to run through a mock draft pre-free agency and see what might be in store for the Kansas City Chiefs. Welcome back to RGR. I'm Ryan, and this is me going rogue on the NFL draft, and specifically the Kansas City Chiefs. Gonna redo this one because we had some technical difficulties with the video that was supposed to go up on Wednesday. Dan Harm's review of cornerback from TCU, Jeff Gladney, his went up Wednesday. So today, we're following on. Want to get back to what should have gone up yesterday was a mock draft, one that I'm going to step you through each selection as we go through it. And I think that's really important so that you see why the selections are made and where I'm coming from, and we can have a pretty good, healthy debate about it. So if you are new to the channel, make sure that you hit the sub button, hit that drop down to all the notifications on the bell, leave your comment below about what you think about these selections or the prospects in general, and leave a thumbs up if you particularly like this style of video. I'm going to be doing more of these as we go through. I'll probably do a mock every other week until the draft. Going to have tons of information for you about all kinds of athleticism metrics. I'm going to have the Rogue Analytics Athletic Matrix draft guides out, doing two this year. Not sure on the release date yet, but it's coming in the next couple of weeks. I will have it ahead of schedule of where I usually do every year, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. Thank you to the guys that I have helping me this year, as well as want to give you a heads up to check out from Matt Derrick. His At Last book has hit the presses, and you can get 25% off if you use the code LOCKEDChiefs25. I'll throw a graphic up here of that here in a minute, but just something for you to keep track of. So today, we are going to use the Draft Network's mock draft machine. And if you listen to Locked On Chiefs, you've heard this before. If not, check out Locked On Chiefs, either here on YouTube, where I put a couple of episodes up, but definitely on iTunes and Google Podcasts, Spotify, all of those, because we hit 5 days a week, and Locked On Chiefs, Chris and I do put a lot of work into that to have some back and forth about the process of rebuilding and getting back to another Super Bowl. We're also partnered with the rest of the Locked On Network, which includes Locked On Draft and Draft Dudes, that are tied to the Draft Network. So today, we're going to use their machine, and we are going to select as the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm picking them here, and we're going to use their predictive board, which is kind of a conglomeration. It tries to predict what's going to happen as different picks come off the board. We're only going to do 5 rounds today because right now the Chiefs found out that they have no comp picks. Because of the playing time and the success that Tyrann Mathieu and Frank Clark and Alex Okafor had, they did not come out in the formula with any comp picks. So the Chiefs have rounds 1 through 5, one selection at a time. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be back, and I'll go over a whole other concept of what's about to happen in free agency. We're doing this mock because we want it out of the way before free agency. We're going to find out more about what might be happening with Chris Jones here next week. So tomorrow I'm going to go through what trades might do to help the draft selection in terms of volume of picks, where they could be traded to, etc. But for today, as it stands today, the Chiefs have 5 picks. That's what we're going to go with. We're going to go at normal speed so we have a little bit of time to talk as it goes on. So as I start this draft, we are going to enter into what's going on, and it is going to start selecting right away. And we're going to see guys come off the board in a pretty good urgency, something I think helps us. And we're also going to see, that's a little too far zoomed, what the selections look like. And I want to make sure that you can see these round numbers. So we're ticking through, coming down. Grant Delpit goes off the board. Niang goes off the board. Niang's a guy who's been rising in a lot of the eyes of at least outside draft analysts. Not sure about where the teams had him to even begin with. But this is a draft that is starting to change a little bit. And I think you're seeing the offensive tackles rise up a little bit more. We're even talking about maybe 4, maybe 5 quarterbacks selected in the first round. That's pretty big and not exactly what I expected. You see Jordan Love went here at 29 in this particular test. Jeff Gladney, who Dan Harms is actually reviewing as a possible selection for the Chiefs. He might be there at 32. He went 25 in this particular draft. So there's a little bit back and forth. And what you do with these is get an idea of what some of the possibilities are. This is not going to represent what the teams have exactly. Nothing is exact. But this is going off of scenarios that could be happening. And so we also noticed that a guy that's been very popular in a lot of the forums and a lot of the comments on this channel is Denzel Mims. He's already gone at this point in this draft. So what does that leave us? Well, the Chiefs have a couple of needs, and I do agree with the top need here as listed by the Draft Network, and that cornerback is need number one. I would rank a couple of these, probably 2 and 3, and running back would be farther down my list because the Chiefs like Damian Williams, they have Darrell Williams coming back, and they have Darwin Thompson. Along with Elijah McGuire, who's under contract, they can bring him up from the practice squad. I do expect them to add another running back at some point in this process, but it will not be with number one. I will guarantee you that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins out of the combination here because a first-round running back is not in the cards for the Kansas City Chiefs because they have bigger fish to fry, and they have to get some things done. Now, the edges are interesting. I don't actually call Zach Bond an edge, to tell you the truth. He's going to be an off-ball linebacker that can walk up and rush in situations, much like we saw Reggie Ragland do last year. I'm not convinced that that's a role that he's actually going to excel at. So not only is he much higher here than I would have him, but he's definitely not something that the Chiefs are going to prioritize going to get right now. I find it interesting that Gross Matos is here. Another option that I thought might be available in the second round. These things are always changing. You've seen a lot of mocks with Ross Blacklock out there, an interesting interior defender. And while I'm not going to select him here, that might change if they lose Chris Jones to a trade. That's really the only way Chris Jones won't be with them. He will either be under contract, hopefully with an extension, or he will end up signing the tag and playing under the 1 year. The other option is that they can sign him to that tag and he can be traded. That may happen. We'll look at that tomorrow. Really interesting to see here that beyond him and another edge in Terrell Lewis, who I think this is pretty high for him, it's very interesting to me that in this scenario, both Patrick Queen and Kenneth Murray are available on the board at 32. I'm not sure that actually happens. And for my money, these players are very, very similar. They ran very similarly at the combine. They both pulled hamstrings at the combine, although neither of them has any lasting injury. That's what we understand at this point. Both are very athletic, but different. Kenneth Murray plays better forward. I feel he's a better blitzer. I like him coming downhill. He's okay in zone coverage. I think that's perfectly fine if that's what you're going to ask him to do, but he's a little bit lacking in picking up man coverage, especially on running backs, which has been a weakness of the Chiefs in the past. I do feel he's a great athlete, and he has enough athleticism to get better at that. Some work with Matt House and Steve Spagnuolo I think would help. Patrick Queen is the opposite. I don't feel instinctually against the run he's as good. I don't feel he takes on blocks as well as Murray. Neither of them are great, but they're not bruisers. That linebacker has changed. That's a guy that now should be your backup linebacker that is more of the thumper bruiser type. So Murray plays better backwards, plays in coverage. I like his athleticism that way. He seems more natural in coverage in man. And so for today's NFL, he's a better fit for what the Chiefs want to do in terms of playing nickel as much as possible. A guy to pair with Hitchens right now and eventually take over for Hitchens as the lead nickel linebacker, the guy that never comes off the field, can play in the base and can play in the nickel, whether it's with another linebacker or with a safety rolled up with him. Patrick Queen is going to be the selection here, which, again, is a little bit surprising for me, given how high the NFL and Draft Twitter in particular has been on him. I'm going to shift this just a little bit more so we can see a little bit better. And I might even zoom it back out just to give you guys a little bit more real estate here of where my video will actually go. So right now, we've accomplished the goal of getting an impact player in the first round, but we haven't accomplished the top goal of bolstering the cornerback room. That's going to be a definite need as we come up here. And as this has rolled through, and let me get back to the top of who's available, what we find is Brandon Ayuk is still here, an interesting wide receiver. I'm not going to be tempted by a wide receiver at pick 2, knowing that we had to go linebacker first because they were the best on the board. Now we have to look at our other positions of need. And wide receiver, while they do need to bolster it, especially if they do end up losing Sammy Watkins. I don't think it's a priority with number 2. This class is so deep. You can get very good athletes and guys that can walk into the wide receiver room and participate, contribute in 2020 in the 3rd, the 4th, maybe even the 5th round. So I'm not going there yet. We're going to take the wide receivers off the board. Love Cam Akers. I think he's a really interesting back. This is too rich for my blood at 63. I would definitely come back to looking at him at the next pick the Chiefs have. Or if the Chiefs were to make a trade, we'll talk about tomorrow, and maybe get somewhere in the 70s, I could see doing that as well. But so we're going to take those 2 tops off. And we're going to look Jeremy Chin, a guy who has really played above where he played in college. A Saluki, I think you guys know the Chiefs have drafted another Saluki in the past. And I think he's an all-around player, but not in a role that I think they can really use. They like Dan Sorensen. They have Tyrann Mathieu. Juan Thornhill should be back for camp. He may not be ready to play week 1, but he should be ready pretty quickly beyond that. So putting a second-round pick into a player that would be a backup is not something that I think that they can afford to do. They have to look at guys that can get on the field in 2020 and make an impact. And so Julian Okwara, I think he might actually go lower than this. An interesting guy, but not as dynamic as I would like out there at the edge if I'm going to take him in the second round. The third round, certainly, and another number of guys in this draft are interesting edges that can do one thing or another that should go later in the draft. We'll come back to that. So we look here, and this becomes a dilemma for me because there are a couple of players available that fit what the Chiefs need and I think could actually play a decent role. Jalen Johnson is one of them at cornerback. And I feel like he is feisty enough to take some of the pressure off of Charvarius Ward and Rashad Fenton, be somebody that can compete with them and see who can come out on top and not have to rely and put that pressure, especially on Fenton, who had some really up moments, had some down moments. I think he needs another year of seasoning. And quite frankly, I think he might need to play on the outside. The Chiefs may do something in free agency at the position as well, so that leaves a little bit more room, but I like him. Uche's an interesting player, undersized edge that I think could play a Sam kind of role. Haven't done too much work on him yet about him playing backwards in coverage, but I do like what he brings as an interesting, smaller edge rusher. And this is where it gets interesting for me. Robert Hunt's an interior offensive lineman that I like. I think he moves well. I think he's been productive. I think he's a guy that could fit in to what the Chiefs want to do pretty well and give them another option at definitely left guard, maybe even right guard, depending on what they do with the guys that they have under contract. We haven't heard any movement about any of the players. Looks like Stefan Wisniewski may be coming back. The Chiefs are talking with him, so that's an interesting one. And I think this is a good place for Hunt. I feel like this is decent value for where he should go. And then we come to Bryce Hall, who I think is probably better playing zone, but can play man. And I think Spags wants to play more zone than he played last year. 53.2% overall for the year was in man, which I think is more than Spags really wants to play for the Chiefs in 2020. So Hall would give you somebody that can play a little bit more zone, be more comfortable there. And honestly, there is some kind of synergy that goes with playing with former teammates. He was a teammate of Juan Thornhill's at Virginia, so that's a nice connection there too. I think Fuller and Breeland showed that guys who have played together in the past have that kind of chemistry that can definitely help in the secondary. So those are the 3 options as I see them on this board. These are the guys that on my big board, which will come out 10 days or so, maybe 2 weeks before the draft. These are guys that are going to be high on it at this point, 63. The ones are all going to be gone. A lot of my high-end 2s will be gone, and this is where we'll be. So it comes down to fit and finish. Can they do what they want them to do? Can they put a corner on an island? Can they put Hunt in at guard and allow him to actually pass protect? I think he might be a little bit better at the run blocking. So I don't think maybe he's the best fit out of these 3. And at the end of the day, if you're going to be an elite defense, you have to be able to play man just as well as zone. So unless there's some outlying reason not to take Jalen Johnson, I'm going to go with him for the second pick in this Chiefs draft. I like Hall. That was actually a pretty tough one for me, and I could easily see the Chiefs going the other way and having Hall above Johnson on their board. It just depends exactly on not just learning the Spags defense, but transitioning to what they want to do with it longer term. and getting to where they're going to be in 2020, which I do expect is going to be somewhat different than we saw in 2019, because the first year in Spags defense is about adjustment and getting into it, finding what players' strengths are. That's why Reggie Ragland didn't play at first. That's why they thought they could play Darren Lee and then didn't end up coming back to him that year. So there's a lot of learning to be done. And so we come to 96, and we've seen a couple of guys that I had kind of on the back burner, keeping an eye on. Van Jefferson is one of them. Troy Pride was another. And it's not going to work out this way right now, but certainly there is a possibility in this draft that the Chiefs double dip at a particular position, corner in particular, maybe interior offensive line. You never quite know. But at this point, there's a couple of options for the Chiefs that I do think fit. There is not a ton of value here in Jake Fromm, any quarterback really. This is the problem with what the media calls best player available. Teams really go by best player available that can help you now, or is a position of need. I don't like using that term, but if you're going to spend maybe a third round, it gets a little bit iffy, but first and second rounders especially, they have to have an impact in their first year. They have to be in a position where they can get on the field. Generally, that's due to efficiency that you already have on the roster. Quarterback is not one of those positions. So right now, as it comes here, the best player on this board is Jake Fromm. He might even be in that position on my board when it comes to this. We'll have to see. But it's not a selection that the Chiefs need to make. They don't need a backup quarterback with a third-round selection. They have Patrick Mahomes. And quite frankly, I expect Matt Moore to be back, and we saw him fill in admirably, so I'm very comfortable with where they're going to be at quarterback. I don't see spending a third-round pick, a top 100 pick, that should be a player that can get on the field in 2020 on a quarterback. So that brings us to who is available. Khalid Kareem, I'm not sure that he can be an impact in this particular team. He might be a fit for someone. I don't think it's going to be for Spags. I just don't feel that connection is there. And when you look here, Darnay Holmes is another corner that is great. Will be in a slot. Will be a guy that can go inside and plays with some tenacity. I like the way he plays. He's a little undersized. I can't remember exactly what he came in at. 5'10". I want to say he was 5'097", so just an eighth under that at his weigh-in at the draft, but I don't have that in front of me right at the second. So, again, undersized, would be a nickel. If Chris Harris ends up coming to Kansas City, which I do feel is a conversation worth having, both for his people and for us in this scenario, that might change this. But he is definitely the leading candidate right now. Ben Bartch, I like where he's coming from, but I don't think you want to spend that on an offensive tackle right now. A day 3 offensive tackle might be in the cards. KJ Hill's an interesting wide receiver underneath that could fill in the slot, but I really don't feel like they want to push McCole Hardman all the way out and try to get him more as an X. I think he needs to move around, and the Z in the slot is where Hardman needs to play. They need a bigger body to line up outside. And as I look through here, we're starting to get to the reaching zone. And here's the thing. Chase Claypool is a player that I think can be a backup tight end and can learn a lot from Travis Kelce and can be another way for them to flood the interior of defenses to make sure that teams, if they want to go single high, we're going to run 4 verts at you with a guy like Claypool who is dramatically faster than Travis Kelce, but Travis Kelce as well, and McCole Hardman as well, and Tyreek Hill. Now, I don't think Claypool can line up outside at X. I don't think that's where he can make his money. I think he's got to be inside as a big slot and, quite frankly, a move tight end, an H-back, basically. Somebody that can mirror or supplement what Travis Kelce is doing. I see a lot of 2 tight end sets if they were end up with this pick. And it is tempting. It is a bit of a reach. He will not be there when the Chiefs come back around, and that's really what you're projecting. Right now, I think Holmes and Claypool are very close on what will be my final board. I think he's a little bit higher than here at 111, but I don't think he's quite as high as Darnay Holmes. So I'm going to go and err on the side of caution right now, and we're going to come back and look at the offense on the backside, and we're going to take Darnay Holmes to kind of plug that hole. The Chiefs have 2 cornerbacks under contract right now, and that's it. I don't count Alex Brown. Yes, technically he is under contract, but I don't think he's in a position to help this team on the field in 2020. I think he's got a lot more development yet to go, so you have to be careful about that. So Damian Lewis just went off the board at 111. A guy that I'd had my eye on, along with Shane Lemieux, as an interior player along the offensive line that could have been an option. Solomon McKinley went as well. Jason Strobridge went. Strobridge is an interesting guy that can play standing up if he has to, but I think he's very comfortable as a more power-oriented defensive end, a guy that actually fits into what Spags and Coach Daly want quite a bit. He was a guy that has been on my list for quite a while. And so my chance taking has paid off here. We don't have to go into this very deeply at all because, lo and behold, despite losing out on a couple of offensive linemen that I think could help this team, we have Chase Claypool available here in the fourth. There are some analysts that report hearing from teams that Claypool is not going to get a big bump out of that combine, that his route running is just too soft, that they don't feel that he can really be a go-to player yet. So fourth round, maybe he does last that long. I expect the Chiefs to be picking somewhere a little bit higher than 138, to tell you the truth, so maybe it's still an option. But he's here now. He fits. Again, I think he can learn a lot from Travis Kelce and help in attacking seams out of either attached, but more importantly, that soft split off that Travis Kelce runs out of quite a bit. I think that's a lot in Chase Claypool's future, and he can help this team. So we're going to grab him as a supplemental weapon for Patrick Mahomes. They're going to have to do something at the X receiver, and maybe that's Pringle. I like what Pringle has done to this point. Is he ready to step up and play meaningful snaps every game? I don't know about that. We're going to have to see how that goes in OTAs, etc. They may end up getting Sammy back. If Sammy's open to a contract extension or a contract restructure completely, there is a possibility that Sammy Watkins could remain on this team and you could have him back. But you got to give him something to work with, some supplemental weapon. And I think Chase Claypool gives that to Patrick Mahomes, so he has another target that he can exploit defenses with that has more speed than we thought, definitely has the size, and while he's not consistently making plays, when he makes plays, a touchdown against Stanford is one of them for Chase Claypool that I think really stood out. Honestly, I think that's the play that stood out most to me in his film. Now, as we get down to the last selection, this is the fifth round for the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't have much need left. And unfortunately, the one that they do have is still interior alignment, and we haven't been able to address that to this point. And as we scroll down and we look, there's not much left. The cupboard is pretty bare. If we just switch over to filter on the interior offensive lineman, Hilbers is more of a tackle. They're projecting him to go into guard. A guy that played at Washington and actually outplayed Trey Adams by quite a bit. Trey Adams has fallen way down, and a guy that should have been a first-round pick a few years ago is not any longer. Shackelford's a maybe. Darrell Williams is a maybe. I'd like to see, honestly, I'd have those guys probably both in the sixth, mid-sixth or later. Hilbers, I'm just not sure about. He didn't quite play as many snaps as the other tackles at Washington, so I'm not feeling great about that. We go back to the all, and they're going to be lower on my board, so who's going to be higher on my board of the players that are left? Gandy Golden is a guy that the Chiefs talked to at the Combine, I know. I believe they have an on-site visit scheduled with him, so he could be an option. But we just got an offensive player as a weapon, so I don't know that we want to do that right here in the fifth round. We're trying to cover our bases at this point and see what else we can do to shore things up. We've taken two corners. If we review the picks that we've made, we went defense heavy in the top 100 in Patrick Queen, Jalen Johnson, and Darnay Holmes. The defense is pretty solid in pass coverage orientation. Right now, we don't know if Chris Jones is going anywhere, so we're going to assume for this draft that he's there. He's going to be either under the tag or on an extension. The defensive front is going to be back to normal as long as Alex Okafor is healthy. We need to look at the offensive side, and this is where you could get a player that sneaks in and does something good, does something to set himself apart. And when you look at this list, at this point in the fifth round, don't go by a single list like this because every team is going to be drastically different. And quite frankly, the farther you go in the draft, the more different the draft boards become from team to team because every team has things that they're looking for and things that they prioritize over others. In fact, that's one of the pitches that I make to teams, that the athletic matrix can help differentiate according to what you want specifically. And as we get down here, I would have considered Lamar Jackson had we not taken two corners already. It's not something that we can see him getting on the field as quickly right now, and we'd like to find somebody that really fits otherwise. Again, I'm not a huge guy for just picking running backs because they're running backs. I think Taylor's an interesting guy. The Chiefs had been talking with McFarland quite a bit from Maryland. He is not on this board. You have a safety from Maryland, but not the same guy. Keyshawn Vaughn is another player that I think the Chiefs had a combine visit, but I'm not 100% on that one. I'd have to go check my notes again. Juwan Jennings did not run very well. I think there's an overlying feeling that the Chiefs want to keep the speed up on the offensive side of the ball, no matter what. It paid off for them getting to the Super Bowl. I don't think they're going to go away from it anywhere. The Washington State receiver, Patman, is an interesting choice. He could be available. He might be a guy that the Chiefs actually end up liking when it's all said and done. I do feel like you probably have to get a visit with him, get in his head a little bit and see what he's about more so. Just because of the offense that he played in, it kind of sets things apart a little bit. So scrolling farther isn't really helping me at this point. This is kind of a conundrum. And Hodges is okay. Better quarterback play probably would have helped him. So I'm going to go with the guy here and provide another weapon in the passing game that I do feel the Chiefs have some kind of inkling towards. I do feel that they like the way that he moves. He's a decent athlete. I wouldn't say that he's world beater, but he's well above average. So the Chiefs are going to select Antonio Gandy-Golden here and add to their wide receiver core, a room that needs to grow. Definitely on the younger side now if Sammy Watkins is not in there. And I think it is somebody that can help them. When we go and review what we've done for the Kansas City Chiefs here, it's actually pretty telling. It worked out very interestingly. This is a little bit of an interesting problem because that's not the true designation of how the Chiefs will use him. They will line him up in the slot as either, you could call him an H-back, you could call him a tight end. I do believe that's Chase Claypool's future. But we went heavy on the defensive side, got some playmakers on that side, particularly in Queen and Darnay Holmes. Some timely selections there, and then came up lucky with Chase Claypool and added another solid body, good size, good athlete, wide receiver that can help round out the receiving core for Patrick Mahomes. What would you have done differently? Leave your comments below. Shout at me what you think I missed or you would have liked to see the team do if this were a real-world scenario. I think it's interesting the way that this fell. I think as I go through, and we'll do another one tomorrow for the trade aspect, as we go through that again next week or the week after, things will change. So this is where they're at today. I'm pretty happy with the way that it came out. And if this were to be what happens for the Kansas City Chiefs, along with probably an off-season free agent acquisition or two, I think they'd be in decent shape. So let's hope that something like this happens. I'm pretty interested in it. Let me know what you think below. If you're not subscribed, hit that sub button right now. Click that bell notification so you know what's going on, and leave a thumbs up if you like this video. I'll be back tomorrow with some trade scenarios around the draft, and we'll be back next week with more in terms of player evals, looking at film. I have a special show for you on Friday. We are giving you 5 days a week content on the Kansas City and the NFL draft. We're in full swing now. Thanks for watching today. Check these out, and I'll talk to you next time.